live here, and I've got a blanket because I'm freezing right now. I think we turned off the heat or something in our house, and it is not quite warm enough for that. So our house is like freezing, but I've got my cool Bob Ross blanket on me. Anyway, so this video is a video response to the hashtag 7 decks for Heavenly Virtues, which was a spin-off of the 7 decks for Deadly Sins. So, this one, gosh, I was really trying to pick decks that I hadn't used in previous tag videos, and I succeeded for the most part, but there are some repeats. Namely, the first two and one other are going to be repeats. So some of these categories I had in my mind. When it said something, I said, "Oh, it's this deck," but it's a deck that I've been showing a lot. So I was like, okay, well, what other decks do I have that fill this category? And I could be comfortable pulling it out for this video. So that's what I really tried to do. Some of these, most of them I succeeded on that, but some of them, there just wasn't another deck that I had that really fit that category. So anyway, let's start with Prudence. And this is the, I'm looking at my notes here. Prudence is a deck that's practical or all-purpose. And I could have picked a few decks here. I could have picked my Book of Shadows So Below deck. I could have picked Anna Kay. But I decided to go with this one, this is the bag I made for it, and I should probably stand by the camera here. I'm gonna have to take my blanket off of me. All right, so this is the bag that I made for it, and this is the Morgan-Greer Tarot in a Tin. So I'm not gonna go too much into this one. Because we've all seen this one and I've shown it before. This is a repeat. So yeah, I really like this deck, and I think it's new to me though. So, and some of these decks that I've picked out for this tag are new to me, so I haven't really used them a lot. And so sometimes the decks that I've picked for these is more of a hopeful, like, I think this deck will be great for this, if that makes sense. But because this deck is it's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, and it's got the very traditional imagery. It's just kind of zoomed in. I just think that works very well with this all-purpose category. And I could have picked my Golden Universal deck, which is basically the Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's got gold accents and it's very pretty. I quite like that one. I will bring that one out for some of these videos at some point. But I just like this one more. And I just feel like this makes a really great all-purpose deck. There we go. Yeah, so I'm not going to go too much into this because I've already talked about this deck a lot in other videos. So, because this is a repeat. All right, so let's put this away. All right, so the next category is Justice, and this is a deck for making decisions. And this was the category that took me the longest time, because in my head, the decks that make the best, that are the best for making decisions are my Lenormand decks. And I've pretty much already covered my Lenormand decks. And I really wanted to try to find a deck, like a tarot deck that fit this category. And yeah, I could have gone with one of the other decks that I've used in previous videos, tarot decks. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the decks that make the best decision-making spreads or that I use for decision-making are my Lenormand cards. And this is the deck that I made myself. These are the actual drawings that I did straight on Bristol board, and then I backed it with scrapbook paper. I did scan all these and put them on make playing cards. I also adjusted what I put on make playing cards because, you know, the size of these cards don't fit the same dimensions, and I put these in 2 sizes. This is my dog, by the way. drew my dog. Her name is a Shilder. But anyway, so I scan these, put them in Photoshop, and I kind of clean them up a little bit, and then I put like a border down at the bottom and a different circle up here with the card number, things like that. And except for the, so I made them in two sizes. The bridge size, which has the name of the card underneath, and a mini size, which doesn't have the name, but all the imagery and the corner things are still there. So yeah, and it's Lenormand is just really great for decision making, because there's not a lot of interpretation like there is with tarot or oracle cards. Lenormand is all about decision making, I think, and it tells it like it is, basically, and whether that's good, bad, whatever, it just explains the situation, and that's why I do like to use Lenormand with tarot and also oracle sometimes, because if I want something deeper than just the decision, or laying out the facts, then I add in tarot. But anyway, so this is my Lenormand deck, and I'll leave a link down in the description to and yeah, here's the partner and person instead of man and woman. On the mini cards it just has the pictures, but on the bridge size it has the name. But I will leave a link down in the description to these to my make playing cards version of these if you're interested at all. All right, so let me put these away. That is the Justice. All right, now we're starting to get into some decks that I haven't really showcased yet in previous videos. So for Fortitude, this is a deck that doesn't pull punches. And I actually picked out two decks for this, because I could have gone either direction, and I felt like it was better to just bring both in. So I'm gonna pull out both right now and then talk about them individually. And neither one of these I have bags for yet, and that's because the boxes are so huge. So I pulled out the Tattoo Tarot, Ink and Intuition, and the Murder of Crows Tarot, and this is the special edition. So they're kind of two different interpretations of this category. So with Tattoo Tarot, the reason I picked this one, and we'll talk about that one first, the reason I picked this one, see, this box is just too huge for this. So I might make a bag, but I really like the box. I just wish it was smaller. So that's really why I haven't made a bag yet for it, is because I like to keep the decks in the boxes that they came in if they're reasonable size, but this is just too big, and I like all the shiny. I like all the shiny, and that's why I kind of want to keep it in its box, but at the same time I can't make a bag for it, and I prefer bags. Anyway, back to the deck. So I picked this one because it's a pip deck. Oh, do I have reversals in here? I think I might. I think I shuffled these incorrectly because I have reversals in. Oh well. All right. So because it's a pip deck, but it's kind of pips with feelings because there's a little Rider-Waite-Smith indications of what the cards mean. Because it's a pip deck, I think it's kind of like what I said with Lenormand. There's not a whole lot of room for extra interpretation, because the pips themselves are they mean what they mean, and because of that, I think it's no nonsense, if that makes sense. So it doesn't pull any punches. The answer you get is the answer you get, and in that respect, I guess I could have also chosen this for the Justice category, the making decisions, because it doesn't pull punches. But I don't know. I think it fits better in this category. And yeah, that was my logic for choosing the Tattoo Tarot for this. Is it's one of my very few pip decks, and I think pips do a really good job at just giving you the information, and there isn't a whole lot of subtext and whatever. I mean, yeah, this can kind of give you an idea of what the Two of Coins means. We got the scales of balancing, sun and moon, those balancing energies. But yeah, but in general, you're really just seeing two coins. And so you kind of just, there's a level of memorization involved with using pip decks. And because of that, because it's less intuitive, or I mean, I guess other people might find that more intuitive. So I don't know. I guess it's how you interpret it. But I guess I sort of see pip decks as being more memorization, if that makes sense. And because of that, it doesn't really pull any punches. So yeah. So I really like this deck. There's a curve to it that I'm trying to, break out. But anyway. They're very thick, though. I have a really hard time shuffling them normally. Okay, so the other deck that I chose for this category, and it goes a different direction, is the Murder of Crows Tarot. And this is the special edition. That's my number. So the special edition had, because the normal mass market version of Murder of Crows, it comes in a different box, and it's all black and white. The backs are black and white. All the cards are black and white. But this version, the special edition version, which is no longer being sold, it's no longer in print, this version has pops of red. And I knew that if I was going to get this deck, it was going to be the special edition, because I don't know, I think I have a much harder time with just straight up black and white decks. It really depends. I mean, I don't have any straight black and white decks. And there might be a reason for that. I like color too much, I guess. But this is the most black and white deck I have, and it's got the pops of red. Now, I chose this deck for Doesn't Pull Any Punches because this is, it's a very dark deck. It's very creepy. I have used this for the Morgan. Obviously, that was what I had in mind. It is not dedicated to her, so I can use it for whatever. But, and by the Morgan here, I sort of mean Namarinia, the three Morgans. And in fact, this deck feels very, very much attuned to Bive. Because it's just got that creepy, dark, ominous. I think that's the word I'm looking for, ominous. There's an ominous feeling to this deck. And because it's so dark, I feel like this is the kind of deck that really does not pull punches. This is not like a hug deck. And, there's a category later on that is called, it was the hope category, and it said dark times, a deck for dark times or a hug deck. And I'm going to get to that later, but I could use this for a deck for dark times, but it's not a hug deck. Yeah, so what I mean is, like, I feel like because of the dark nature of this deck, it's not a deck that pulls punches, and it's not a deck that's going to be flowery and make you feel good. It's a deck that's going to really tap into core issues, and maybe it's because of the dark imagery. And this is definitely the darkest, most ominous deck that I own, the creepiest deck, I guess. So yeah, I definitely could not have enjoyed this deck if it was just the straight black and white version. I know it, and that's why I really wanted to get the special edition version. Anyway, so very good deck. It's not a deck that I use often at all. I've only used it a couple times, but I guess it gives me that feeling. It's a deck that really is not going to sugarcoat things. Okay, so the next category is Temperance, a deck pairing. So this is supposed to be 2 decks, and there was really no other 2 decks I could have picked except for these 2. And I'm going to put it this way, actually. And if you can tell, I made these bags to match. This one has swan feathers, and this one has raven feathers. Yeah, so let me pull these out. They both have the same border around them. Now this deck I did feature in the 7 decks for Deadly Sins as my kind of, what was that? The deck for bragging, like I can't remember the Pride, maybe? Because I got the special edition version, and in that case, I could have also put this in that category. So this is the Pacific Northwest Tarot and the Seed and Sickle Oracle. And I specifically bought the Seed and Sickle Oracle to be paired with the Pacific Northwest Tarot. And obviously I made the bags match. You know, yeah. So let me pull everything out and we'll do the whole Don Michelle thing where I do the 2 on each side, which isn't always how I do deck pairings. Because when I do it like this, there we go. Am I in frame? I may have to zoom in when I edit this. All right, so, and then pull out these Liminal 11 multi-step boxes I find them so annoying. Like, there doesn't need to be all of these extra things, just one box. In fact, the Pacific Northwest Tarot is kind of the perfect box. I mean, excellent, easy. Yeah, anyway. Let me get the books out of the way. All right, so I think these cards, I'm going to try to zoom in on here. Okay, hopefully that's good. I zoomed in on the camera itself, so here we go. So I just think the style of these go really well with each other. It's like the same kind of art, if that makes sense. And I just knew before I even got these, oh, some of these are upside down. I knew before I even got this deck that before I got either deck, that these 2 would just pair so well with each other. There's just a nice energy that it goes together, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I like this crack of thunder. It just feels like it's being mimicked here with the Knight of Swords. And I don't know, there's something that, oops, there we go. There's something that just, because the 2 styles are so similar, there's the same kind of artwork, it just goes together, if that makes sense. Yeah. Ooh, look at that. The 2 queens with this in the middle, and they got the key, and wow. That I like that combination there. Yeah, there's something I just really enjoy about these 2 decks next to each other. And then one thing that I like about doing this is you can kind of pick out common things. Like here we have this hermit walking away, and we have this buttercup that has the same sort of energies that this 10 of Wands has, because it's got those repeating colors here, the using the color, picking out the colors that are similar, whereas this one's different, and maybe this leads to this. Walking away or going off and doing things on your own is what's leading to more of a burden, more of, and then because this is an oracle deck, I do have to look up the meanings. So like, you know, if I looked up buttercup, one thing I wish it would say what season this is from, because the cards are not in alphabetical order. They're in order of like season, and I don't know whether buttercup is spring, summer, autumn, or winter. Buttercup is spring. So determination, perseverance, inspiring passions. So you know, this could be saying that it almost a warning, because sometimes we might see that as a positive thing, like tapping into our determination or using perseverance, you know, our following our passions. This hermit, instead of being part of the team, is going off and following his passion, but that's leading to more work for him and to a heavier burden. And this isn't necessarily a negative, it's just saying what's going on. But yeah, I like this sort of combination. And I'm trying to pull these apart, but I'm getting the piles mixed up over here. Anyway, so I'm not going to focus on this too much, but I quite like these two decks together. I think they have a lot of the same energies. I do still need to do a big deep dive of the Seed and Sickle, because at this point I'm still going through and needing to use the books, and yeah. Anyway, so let me get this stuff out of the way and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so I put those away. So the next category is Faith. And this is a deck that I would use for spiritual guidance. Now, I could have gone the easy route, and I could have picked the Crow Tarot, which I've shown a million times before, because that is the deck that I have dedicated to a deity, and so obviously that deck brings me spiritual guidance and whatever. I could have picked that. I could have picked the Anima Mundi Tarot, which I've also shown before, and that deck I often really enjoy using on the full moon. But again, I wanted to use it. I wanted to find a deck that I haven't really showcased too much, and because of that, I decided to pick this one. And this is a deck that I also use for full moon readings, and in fact, I had just pulled it out because the full moon is in a couple days, and I was thinking that I might use this deck again, which I've used for past full moon readings. And this is a bag I made for it. It's got really pretty, like a lake sort of, like with lily pads and stuff. It's very pretty inside, and flowers. And nice owl embroidery. Now this is, let me pull it out. This is the Forest of Enchantment Tarot, and I think I did a pretty good job matching the bag to the deck. I think so anyway. What do you think? I think I did a good job. Anyway, so I chose this deck. It's not a deck I use a whole lot, but the spreads I have used for this, or the times that I've used this, has been in spiritual readings. And I think because it's very earthy, and it's more a specific type of spirituality. It's where I really want to feel that tapping into that earthy, connecting to the surroundings, connecting to the land, really connecting to the land sort of energy. I really like this deck for that. I wish that the suits were not renamed, though, because sometimes I have to, like, I don't know. I'm less a fan of that. I think I would just prefer if they kept the same names, you know, across decks. Sometimes it can be done really well, the naming of the changing of the names and stuff, but sometimes it just bothers me. But anyway, I have other decks that would fit this category better, like my Crow Tarot or the Anima Mundi Tarot, maybe even the Pagan Otherworlds, because that feels like a very spiritual deck to me as well. But I picked this one partially because I haven't really talked about it in my videos, and I do use this deck for spiritual readings, especially full moons. It does give me a Bridget energy, which is who I do the readings for on the full moons. Yeah, so it's just very earthy and earth spirituality. Yeah, I like it. So I'm sure this has been shown many times in other videos. But yeah, there's something about this deck. Oh, I love this. That really connects to the earth. Maybe it's got that sort of wild fae energy, but it's kind of storybook, you know. Yeah, I like this deck. Ooh, I like this card, the Nine of Visions. And it's like tossing a coin into a well. So it's, you know, got that wish, making a wish sort of energy that the Nine of Cups, that's what the Visions one is. The Nine of Cups is, you know, that wish fulfillment. Yeah, I really like this deck. Yeah. All right, so I'm not going to keep going through that. All right, so let's move this to the side. Okay, so Hope. Okay, yeah, this is the one. So this category, Hope, it said a deck for dark times / a hug deck. And I had a hard time with this one at first because a deck for dark times is very different to me than a hug deck. So I went with the hug deck interpretation, but I think the way it's written, I think a lot of people sort of see those things as the same thing. Like if you're not in a good place, you want a hug. You want a hug deck. I kind of have a different interpretation of that. If I'm thinking of a deck for dark times, I'm going to possibly go with a dark deck, like, say, the Murder of Crows. This is a dark deck. And, you know, if I'm going through dark times, and I don't know, they're not just that I always need a dark deck if I'm going through dark times to kind of lean into that energy. It's just sometimes I might want to go with that, and sometimes I want a hug deck. But yeah, a deck for dark times I interpret differently than a hug deck. So this category I decided to go with hug deck. So I chose the Wise Dog Tarot, and this is the bag that I just made for this last week, I think. So I'm really going to showcase this in a later video because I've made a few bags recently, and they're all for MJ Cullinane decks that I have. So I'm going to do an upcoming video that really goes through each of the MJ Cullinane decks that I have, plus the bags that I made for them. All right, so this is the Wise Dog Tarot, obviously by MJ Cullinane, and this is actually a very new deck for me. So it's one of those things where it's not yet this type of deck, but I could very easily see this being a hug deck for me because, I mean, it's dogs. And I am definitely more of a dog person than I am a cat person. I love cats. But when I go through this deck, it just makes me happy. Even the scary cards, it makes me happy. Excuse me. So because of that, when I was trying to figure out a deck that could be a hug deck, because I really don't have very many of those. I almost picked the Light Seers deck because I was like, I use this deck for clients who need like a softer message, because I see the Light Seers Tarot as being a very soft message type of deck. Whereas this, but I don't know. I wouldn't call it a hug deck though. Whereas this, I want to hug all these dogs. I feel like they're hugging me. I think of my dog, who her breed is not in this deck, sadly. She's a Harrier Hound, and Harriers look like big beagles. And so when I see things, card decks or whatever else that has different dog breeds in it, I always try to find my dog's breed, and if I can't find her breed, then I just go with beagles because they look similar. But there's no beagles in this, there's no harriers in this, which makes me a little sad. But but in general, like, these cards just make me happy. And I love dogs, and yeah. So, and the thing is, this deck, if you ask me, probably a couple months from now, I would probably use a different deck for this, because I am expecting a deck, a dog deck that I backed on Kickstarter last year. It is the Barcana Tarot, and I cannot wait for that one to come in. But that one's a little more cutesy, a little cutesy colors. And because of that, I do think it will take over this deck for that category. But I'm totally okay with that, because the more I pull this deck out, the more I use it, the more I think I'm definitely going, I love this Ace of Pentacles. The more I think I'm going to dedicate this deck to the god Lu, because it gives me that energy. Yeah, it makes me happy, and it is my current hug deck, I guess. But that's also because I don't know that I really have hug decks. But I'm thinking I will probably dedicate this deck to Lu, which means I will only use it for Lu readings. But I haven't made that decision yet. I may change my mind. But I'm pretty sure that when I do get the Barkana Tarot, it will take over for this for this deck, for the hug deck category. All right, so we are on the last category. Let me put this away. Just picking up my little fabric thing here. I'm still in my art room. That's why the background is this purple cutting thing. All right, so Charity was the last one. A deck you would give to someone. And so I didn't interpret this as a deck that you want to get rid of per se. Like I'm done with this deck. I don't like this deck. I'm just getting rid of it. That's not really how I interpreted this category, and I don't think that's how most people interpreted this category. It was more a deck that, what deck of yours would you give away to someone who is just getting into tarot, or maybe not necessarily that you want to get rid of the deck, but that you would maybe you have a friend who you think this might work for them a little better than it does for you. Does that make sense? So this is a bag that I have it in, and it doesn't actually match the deck. And I love this bag. I'll probably, I'm not going to get rid of this deck, but I do think I will eventually get a different bag for it, and use this for something else. But I chose the Green Witch Tarot here. And, okay, and I pulled out, because when I was picking out the decks for this, I was going through this deck. So I'm going to pull out the cards that I wouldn't say that I had issue with, but, and they're all major arcana cards. So I'm going to pull those out and talk about them in a second. But I chose this deck. I could have chosen a few of them. I could have chosen Wildwood Tarot, though I don't know that I necessarily think that's good for beginners. And also, I don't know, what does that really mean, good for beginners? You know, any deck could be good for beginners. It depends on what their style is, I guess. But I don't know. There were other decks that I could have put in this category, but I ultimately chose this one because this is a deck that I don't dislike. I really don't. I don't dislike this deck. But I think it sort of represents a time in my spiritual practice that I've sort of moved past, if that makes sense. And this Seven of Pentacles, I often think it's the Eight of Pentacles. I don't know, maybe it's because they're all in a row like that, and my thought process, and it looks like he's working on them, that my thought process goes to the Eight of Pentacles with the lined up, yeah, anyway. But so this is a very, very kind of Wiccan-y deck, and it bases its imagery and all of that off of Anne Mora's Green Witchcraft, which after I in my early practice, because when I started, when in 1999 was when I started my path, I was Wiccan. But I soon realized, and it took a few years for me to realize this, but my path, I'm not Wiccan. But I still liked a lot of what Wicca was for me in the beginning. So as my spirituality progressed, I found that I really enjoyed Anne Mora's books, the Green Witchcraft series, and I still do. There are still elements of her practice that I still incorporate into my practice, and I keep the books and stuff. But I would say there was a much bigger shift in my spirituality over the past 2 or 3 years. And I've always known in my spirituality that I wanted to follow a more, I'm going to say the word Celtic, a more Celtic path, if that makes sense. But more specifically, Irish and also Welsh, and a little bit of Scottish witchcraft as well. So yeah, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. Even though those are three totally different cultures, it's where my personal interests were, or where it was taking me. My words. I don't know how to explain this. And I would say that now my practice is very focused on the Irish paganism, but I still have, I still honor some Welsh deities, and I still, I have elements of that in there, though I would say my practice is pretty firmly going in the Irish paganism route. Anyway, and I feel like because of that, this just doesn't really fit me anymore, if that makes sense. And I can really see that in some of these cards that I pulled out. And these are all from the Major Arcana from this deck. And they're renamed, right? The Major Arcana is renamed, which also sort of bugs me because I just, maybe I would have an easier time if instead of the Fool, or instead of the Green Man, it just said the Fool. Or instead of the Lord and the Lady and the Lord, it said the Lovers. Like, maybe I would have an easier time with that. And I wouldn't feel the way that I do about this. And I think devil is nature. And, I mean, the book probably explains where they're coming from here. And, yeah, but the Wild Hunt for the Tower, I could see that. So I don't know that I have a problem with that per se. The Horn God for the Emperor, yeah. So I like the She for Temperance, sort of. But it's a very Victorian looking fairies because they've got the wings and they're like little pixies and stuff. This card I don't like because it has the Wiccan reed right there, harm none, and I don't know. It takes me out. This is probably the main card that I would change. This one, but just take away the harm none. Just leave a labyrinth on there and scales or whatever for justice, I think, and maybe I could find meaning in that. Yeah. The crone, I mean, we got Maiden Mother Crone stuff here. We got Holly and Oak King, and, of course, some of these things didn't originate from Wicca. Wicca got them from other things. So, that's fine. I don't have problems with the Holly King and the Oak King. We kind of incorporate that in our family. It's more like a kid thing, though. Like for, Yule, we call Santa the Holly King, things like that. And that's just for kids. It's not necessarily part of our spirituality. It's more of a fun thing for kids. It's kind of how I look at it. But yeah, and this is the Hanged Man, is the Oak King, and 9, the Hermit. I like these cards. I like this art. But I just, in general, I feel like the energy of this deck, I like the Witch for the Magician. The energy of this deck just doesn't really fit my spirituality anymore, if that makes sense. It's got elements of it, but because of it, I just haven't been pulling this out. And because of that, because I don't dislike the deck, I just think I have sort of moved past it. I do think it would be a good deck for someone else who may be in that path, because it's not bad. I like it, and I think it could be very beneficial to people. But yeah, I don't know what else I'm saying about this. It's a deck that I could give away, but I'm not necessarily, like I said in my previous video, I don't give away my decks, so I'm keeping the deck. But if I were to give away a deck and be happy about it and think that this deck could benefit someone, it would probably be the Green Witch Tarot. So anyway, that was a lot. I'm going to get all the decks out here and... Okay, so here are all of the decks. So for Prudence, a practical deck, I picked the Morgan-Greer. For Justice and making decisions, I picked the Long Week in Lenormand, which is the deck that I made. For Fortitude, I picked 2 decks. This is decks that don't pull any punches. I picked the Tattoo Tarot and the Murder of Crows Tarot, this limited edition version. For Faith, or no, Temperance, I chose the deck pairing. I chose the Pacific Northwest Tarot with the Seed and Sickle Oracle. And for Faith, I chose the Forest of Enchantment Tarot. For Hope, a hug deck, I chose the Wise Dog Tarot. And for Charity, I chose a deck that I would give to someone. I chose the Green Witch Tarot. All right, so thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye.